Hello and welcome to the most important episode of the Business of Story I've ever produced. I'm Park Howell. The coronavirus and the resulting COVID-19 disease it causes has now infected, as of this recording, nearly 750,000 Americans and 2.5 million people worldwide, resulting in 166,000 deaths. It's upended all of our lives. But it's hard to truly appreciate the coronavirus's impact until it strikes the health of your family. Well, that's exactly what happened to us when our 57-year-old brother Chris contracted COVID-19 in March in the Pacific Northwest. The pandemic had already struck their family as Chris and his wife Mary were unable to attend the rite of passage ceremony called Match Day for their daughter Elsie Bigelow. Elsie and her husband Spencer were concluding their fourth year of medical school at the Sidney Kimmel Medical College at Thomas Jefferson University in Philadelphia. A few short days after the four of them celebrated Match Day on FaceTime, the coronavirus caught up with Chris. So on today's show, Chris and Elsie have joined me to share their respective harrowing stories of how COVID-19 impacted their lives and nearly took one. You can explore photos of Chris's battle with COVID-19 right down to his chest x-rays and an article Mary wrote about her experience in the show notes at businessofstory.com. So now, please welcome to the show my brother, Chris Howell, and his daughter, Elsie Bigelow. Elsie and Chris, welcome to the Business of Story.
Morning, Parkakarkas.
Thank you very much, Uncle Park.
Everyone has been through a ton. Excuse me. It's these allergies kicking in again, I think.
Oh, yeah, that's what I blamed it all on to begin with.
Everyone has been through a ton with this COVID thing, but boy, no one more so than you two in a lot of respects. Chris, this started for you, about 3 or 4 weeks ago?
Been about 3 weeks ago now, yeah. That's when it all started.
Even before that, though, COVID was starting to clamp down on everyone's families. And Elsie, you were just about ready to graduate from medical school. And there's a big ceremony that I never knew about. Chris was telling me about it when you and your husband Spencer, when all medical students get to know where they're going to do their residency, that got canceled too. Can you two take us through that a little bit?
Yeah. So every fourth year medical student is supposed to get their envelope, which has where they're going for residency. And it's a really big deal. Like, honestly, more important than graduation for me, because that's where you're going to be for the next 4 years. And there's no certainty in the process. Like, we know that we're going to graduate, but we don't know where we're going to match for residency. So my parents had been planning to come out to Philadelphia from Seattle for months and months, and it was scheduled for March 20th. It's the same day and the same time for every fourth year medical student in the nation. So it's a really, really big deal.
Called Match Day, and you and your husband Spencer, you two got married just about a year ago up in Seattle.
Yeah, about a year ago in my high school's chapel up in Seattle. So we've been married for maybe 8 months now.
And you both graduating at the same time. And so you were out interviewing around the country for different residencies, and you were hoping that they would put you two in the same hospital. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. We have to link our applications, and it's a really challenging process to match alone, like regardless, but matching as a couple is very complex. And we had to go to so many different hospitals. We were in Boston and New York, and then we were in California and Washington, and we just flew all over the country over the past year.
How many did you interview at?
I think when we got down to it, I interviewed at 23, which is a lot more than what other people do, just because we had to with sheer numbers for the couples match.
And then where did you end up?
So we both matched at UCSD, which is our number one, so University of California, San Diego. For anesthesia, we're both going to be anesthesiologists, and our first year is going to be at Scripps Mercy Hospital, which is also in San Diego.
So you're out in San Diego now, but as this was all going down, you were still back in Philadelphia. And Chris, I remember being on the phone with you, and you and Mary were pretty disappointed, to say the least, that you couldn't be out there in Philly on March 20th for match day to celebrate.
Oh yeah, that was terrible time because we've been really looking forward to that for, like Elsie said, several months. Such a big deal and such a unique place that is there, that something we really missed. But with this COVID, you can only do what you can do. So
Yeah. Around that same time, Chris, your whole adventure in this started. You were up skiing with some good pals of all of ours, Rick Painter, AJ Gollifon, and some others. Can you take us back to when this whole sort of avalanche, for lack of a better pun,
yeah,
in your health started going downhill?
yeah, well, that started. It was actually the weekend before we were supposed to go back to Philly for match day. I was up skiing up there at Stevens Pass and going down this kind of a steep slope, trying to get into this bowl, and my knee just gave way, and I crashed. I fell over, and I tried to stand up, but I couldn't stand up. And this was all right at the beginning of the COVID thing. Everybody was distancing at that time and everything. But anyway, I had to slide down the hill to get to a flat spot so they could pick me up in the toboggan. All my buddies, Rick and AJ and all those guys, really helped me get down that hill. So the ski patrol shows up, and I take the toboggan ride down and go into the clinic there. They check me out, and they can't do a whole lot, so they ice me, and it was all very clean and social distance at that time. But the skiing was so good, I didn't want these guys to ruin their day just because I ruined my knee, right? So
Right.
I sent them on their way, went up and sat in the lodge, and everybody was 6 feet apart and did the whole thing. It was very, very sterile, if you will.
But you were only arm's distance apart from that beer, I'd imagine, at this point.
Well, no, I was less than an arm distance from about 3 of those beers. So that worked out pretty well. But anyway, I sit in the lodge eating lunch, and about 3 hours later, the guys came back to get me, and down the mountain we went. So what I know now is a torn ACL. So
Torn ACL. So then you got back to your home out at the Kitsap Peninsula. And so everyone knows, you're a farrier, horseshoer. So you're out, you're in good shape, an outdoorsman. You are back, but now you're pretty much laid up at home. What happened next?
Yeah, I was out of work, of course, that week. That was a Saturday. That was the 14th where I actually had the accident. So we laid around here Sunday. And on Monday, the 16th, I guess, I went to the urgent care at the orthopedic place down here in Silverdale just to get my knee checked out. And sure enough, that's where they found that, yes, I did tear my ACL.
What they do, was it an X-ray or MRI or what they do?
No, it's just physical examination. It was the orthopedic doctor and then a resident there with him. And he just gave me a physical examination and said, yep, that's a tore ACL. So at that point, they sent me up to orthotics and prosthetics place to get a brace for my knee. These are the 2 places I went on Monday, and I went through that process, and the only people that were there was the receptionist and then the guy that set me up with the brace. But then I got an MRI the following day, which is Tuesday, here at Paulsbo. Like I said, everybody was social distancing and everything was clean and all that was good. But I did go get my MRI there, and that's where they, found out for sure that I had torn my ACL and some other issues in my knee.
So you had been in a couple different clinics at this point, and it's really hard to say where you could have potentially picked up the virus. It could have been up skiing. It could have been before that, I guess. It could have been in one of these clinics, but you were pretty much at home for the rest of that week, really not out and about around people. Right?
Exactly. I stayed at home all week, resting my knee, icing, trying to get it healthy enough so I could get back to work. So really, I didn't do anything that week. I can't even remember going anywhere else.
And then that Friday was the big day for Elsie and Spencer. That was match day. And I remember you guys doing a little FaceTime or something when you opened up your envelopes.
Yeah, we FaceTimed them in. We had a friend who printed out the letter for us because our school wasn't able to give it to us, and we were able to open the letters with my parents on FaceTime. And we have a little golden retriever puppy, and he was able to be there with us too, which was pretty fun.
And so, Elsie, will you, I suppose, not have an official graduation ceremony now because of this?
So, yeah, it sounds like we're having a virtual graduation, and part of, graduating from medical school is getting hooded because we're doctorates, but that's not going to happen anymore. I know that there's a friend in my class, and his dad is a physician at Jefferson, and his dad was going to hood him, and he can't do that anymore, which is pretty sad. So we'll see what they do for us. I think they've been really good at trying to figure out what's best and still trying to make it special, but it's unprecedented. So
Yeah. Well, that's disappointing, but a huge congratulations in order for all the hard work you and Spencer and the other graduates have done. And the timing couldn't have been better for our family to now have a newly minted doctor
Yeah.
among, in the midst because of how you helped keep us all informed as this was all going down. And maybe, I don't know, some of the unique access that you got to your dad's care, being able to talk to some of the professionals up at the Swedish hospital, but we'll talk about that in a minute. So Chris, now you've gone through, it's Friday, March 20th, you and Mary have celebrated with Elsie and Spencer. What was your weekend like that weekend?
Well, it's just the same as the rest of the week, just kind of laying around taking care of my knee, hanging out Saturday and through Sunday. I was feeling really good. Sunday night I was watching a movie, drinking some beers, and just it was a good weekend for, having a tore ACL at the time.
And just kind of wondering, all right, what's the future hold for you in getting that fixed so that you could get back to work as quickly as you could?
Yeah, exactly.
A few years ago, you had another operation that kept you out of working for about, I don't know, what, six,
8 weeks.
8 weeks. And you had told me a story about how your fellow farriers, horseshoemen, came and took care of your clients for you basically, and then those that could actually extended their income from your clients to you to help get you through that.
Yep. Yep. They're doing that right now as well. So we got a great group of guys up here that, we all kind of stick together and help each other in these times, so it's been excellent.
I just, when you told me that story a year or so ago, I had not heard it. And I was just,
So,
really heartwarming, really like there's the essence of really, really good people, you're
yeah.
surrounded by and an industry taking care of itself. So,
Yeah, no,
okay.
I've had people calling from like farriers calling from Woodby Island and even Eastern Washington to see if I needed help, and they would be very willing to help, but I didn't need those guys this time. But
Well, and the reason why I think this show is so important is because as I have spoken to my friends and my colleagues all across the country, and I tell them about a little bit about what you are going through, they just pepper me, of course, with all kinds of questions. And they all said essentially the same thing, is that it didn't really get totally real for them until they were living vicariously through me, through you, that you were the closest connection of, an important person in their life, that it was kind of a wake-up call to them. And I was really shocked at how many people I've spoken with have really had no brush with COVID in any way, shape, or form. And that's why I think the show's so important, because it can catch you, in a moment's notice. Now, leading up to this, were you a big believer in the virus, or what were you thinking about it?
no, at that point, I knew it was an issue, but I didn't take many precautions, and I didn't think it was going to ever blow up to the way it has now, especially with me.
You weren't in the demographic of anyone that had any sort of pre-existing condition. You were in good shape. We have our mom, 95, out in Seattle, but she's living in the home that we all grew up in, the Happy Eight. So she's sequestered on 12 acres out there away from all the madness, very
Right.
healthy. And so I think for the rest of us too, we were just like, yeah, this is just kind of a flu that other people are going to be impacted by. And there's just no
Exactly.
way
That's
it's going to hit us.
exactly how I felt. Yes. Won't happen to me.
So then what happened?
Well, after that, I had a good night's sleep, and I woke up in the morning and I didn't feel right. Something was going on, and I had terrible diarrhea the first thing, and my head was all stuffed up. And the funny symptom I had was my scalp hurt. Anytime I rubbed the head or scratched it, man, it was terribly sore. But I brushed all that off as allergies. I live under a cedar tree out here that's just been spitting pollen for the last 2 weeks. And I've had issues like that before.
You're just chalking it up to allergies, huh?
Exactly. I just figured, I must be allergic to that tree out there. Something's killing me here. But I mean, it was an all day long thing. And usually it's a morning thing and I'd clear out of it. But this day it lasted all day. But I still was thinking allergies.
When or what was the moment that hit you when you thought, there's something more to this?
Oh, well, I don't know, as much as it hit me as it hit my wife, because I was still
Mary.
Yeah. I was still, chalking it up to allergies. And, I didn't have a whole lot of energy on Monday or Tuesday. I just kind of, and it seemed like things were getting worse. I had a little fever. I never got above like 100.3 on my fever, but I could tell I was getting difficult to breathe. And then Mary come home. She was down with her mother. She's got an older mom that she's taking care of. So she came home knowing I'm having these effects. And that Thursday, she's like, you need to go get that checked on.
So now we're on Thursday, March 26th, just to keep our timeline going. Mm-hmm. So Elsie, when did you hear about it? And when did you start getting concerned about your dad?
So I called my dad, I guess, on Monday. And I was just checking in on him, seeing how he's feeling. And when he says something is wrong, it kind of piques my interest. So he said, I'm really tired. I'm really tired. And that doesn't really sound like him. And, I'm thinking in my head, okay, common things being common. What's going on? It might be the flu. It might be allergies like he's saying, but it just didn't really sound like him. And then I guess on Tuesday or Wednesday when I heard that he was having a cough now, because I kept asking that question, are you short of breath? Are you having cough? Looking out for those signs and symptoms of COVID-19. I guess I just really noticed on Wednesday that I should be concerned, but I can't be there. I only know what he tells me, and sometimes he's pretty stoic. So I think my mom coming home and really sounding the alarm made me realize it more.
With all that being said, you got to realize that Elsie was driving across country at this time too.
When did you and Spencer leave Philadelphia in your rig and with your puppy and started headed towards San Diego?
So on match day, after we gotten our results, our school emails us and says, hey, look, graduation is canceled. And we had already known that our last rotation in April was going to be online. So at that point, we were like, okay, graduation's canceled. And then we started hearing on Sunday night that on Monday, Philadelphia was going to be shelter in place. And so on Sunday night, maybe at like 10 o'clock at night, Spencer and I said, look, let's just leave. We should go before this gets worse, and we should go stay with family. So on Sunday night at 10:30 at night, I booked a U-Haul. Monday, we packed up our entire house. Tuesday, the house was in the U-Haul in an hour and a half, and we were on the road at noon on Tuesday, driving to San Diego from Philadelphia.
So the whole time Chris is starting to experience these symptoms and starting to go downhill, you guys are packed up and driving clear across country.
Yeah, absolutely. It was crazy and surreal. It was my husband and I were switching off driving. We would drive like 12 hours a day, and we have our golden retriever puppy just plopped in the middle of us, happy as could be. And I was checking into my dad, trying not to bug him too much, but maybe calling twice a day, seeing where he was at, checking in with him, texting, things like that.
Yeah. So Chris, when did things really go south for you?
Well, it was out Thursday the 26th, and that's when I went into my general practitioner to get checked out. So I go in there, and they got the tent outside and the whole thing, and it's 42 degrees, and the wind's blowing, and I was freaking cold. So I'm sitting there, and they take my vital signs and everything, and they said, yeah, this guy's sick. So they gave me a swab for pneumonia. That's when they shoved that swab all the way up through your brain. It hurts terrible.
Tell us, take us there. What was that like?
Oh my God. They sit you in this chair and they said, okay, this is going to be a little uncomfortable. And they get this swab that's about 6 inches long, and they shove it all the way up your nose. You swear it's going right into your brain. So they swab it, and they got to hold it there for a few seconds. They pull it out, and they go, okay, that's done. Great. Oh, well, no, they got to do the other side too. So they sawed me twice there. And this swab was for pneumonia. They were thinking maybe this guy's got pneumonia, and that's apparently a pretty quick test because they went inside and tested and came out and it came back inconclusive.
Oh, great.
Yeah. So at that point, they said, okay, you got to go down and get checked for COVID, which is, you had to go to another clinic in Silverdale, which is probably 15, 20 minutes away. So I drove down there, went through the same routine, sitting out in the tent, and cold and blustery. And finally I get in there and they check my vitals once again and bring me inside the clinic at this point. And the doctor comes out and sure enough, here comes these swabs again. It's like, oh no. So, yep, here it goes. One more time, swab. But she only did it one time, thank God. So she took the swab and then they came in and take lung x-rays of me. And that radiologist said, then your lungs look great. So I was thinking, okay, well, maybe it is just pneumonia or the flu or something. That's fantastic. They also took some blood and checked that. But at that point, I was feeling pretty rough. And, I was limping around with a cane and my bad knee and the whole thing. So I was kind of a train wreck at that time.
Yeah.
I had spoken with you, I think, Thursday night or maybe Friday morning, and you were just talking about how miserable it was sitting out in that parking lot tent and that it was cold and windy and you just couldn't get warm. You were just shaking out there. How long were you out in that tent?
The whole time. Well, the first tent I was in for probably 20 minutes and it was cold enough. And then the second tent, they got me in there pretty quick, maybe 10 to 15 minutes at that time.
My mom sent me a picture of my dad in that tent. She had taken it from her van, and he looked so sad and miserable.
Oh, I never saw that picture.
Oh, it's quite a picture, Dad.
Oh.
Okay, so Chris, this is Thursday, right? And
yeah, that's Thursday.
You get home. Do you feel like you're still going downhill at this point, or what's your general condition?
Yeah, I kind of felt like I was circling the drain at that time. I laid in bed all day on Friday. I mean, zero energy, had a fever, zero appetite. It was really difficult to eat. So I was shot. I mean, it was terrible. And then Saturday, the 28th, was no better. It wasn't worse, I don't think, but it was no better. I literally laid in bed all day.
Did you lose your sense of smell and sense of taste like other people have talked about?
I didn't really do that until I got into the hospital. That's when I really recognized that I had no taste or smell.
When did you think then that this is really bad?
Well, it's a few days off yet. So
okay, so you're still hanging in there thinking you're going to beat whatever you got. You're not really still certain at this point that you have COVID?
Yeah, I didn't know. And then Saturday about noon, I'm laying in my bed and I got two phones, a work phone that's in my office, and then I got my cell phone with me. Well, the doctor was calling on my office phone, my general practitioner, Dr. Carr. And, I heard it ring. There's no way I had any energy to go up and get it. So I heard it ring a few times. And then finally about noon, my cell phone rings and it's Dr. Carr, and he is really concerned. He said, well, I've been calling you all morning. I'm like, well, yeah, I called the wrong number. I'm on my cell phone. And he says, I almost sent the police out there for a wellness check. He says, yes, you've got the COVID. And that's when I obviously knew, okay, this isn't good.
Yeah, I'll say so. Elsie, where were you in your trip across the country when you started getting really concerned? And when did you finally get to San Diego?
So we left on Tuesday midday, and I got to San Diego on Friday afternoon. We made it a really, really quick trip. And I was starting to get more concerned on Friday, more from the fact of I would FaceTime my dad, and he's like, I can't talk to you that much. Like, I have a lot of people calling and checking in, but it's also just he was tired and didn't want to talk. And I think I started to get really concerned on Saturday when he was positive and he wasn't turning the corner, because he started having symptoms on Monday. And then on Sunday, I was getting multiple phone calls from my mom, who was really sounding the alarm and the only one really there seeing him, because my dad was just trying to push through it. And my mom really took the lead and decided that enough was enough.
And for anyone that knows Chris, he's tough energetic and always, the happiest guy in the room. So when you see him just the opposite and he doesn't have the energy to even do a lot of FaceTiming, something is up, whether he's going to admit
Yeah,
it or not, right?
absolutely. Absolutely. I know him and I know that this is not like him. And so I took those signs very seriously.
So, Chris, the other question people asked me is, you guys, if I've got this right, you'll clarify it for me here in a second. Sunday, Mary is taking your oxygen level in your blood by, I guess, one of those things you clip on your finger?
Yeah, one of those oximeters or oximeters or whatever they call them. Elsie knows what they're called.
Yeah. Yeah, you got it. We call it a pulse ox. Yeah.
Pulse ox.
Where did she get that, and how did she have the foresight to have that handy for you?
Oh, Mary does a lot of research. Actually, she just ran down to the Rite Aid and they had them there. So she went and bought one down there.
So she was nurse at home for you, keeping an eye on you, because you sound like you were still a bit in denial over this whole thing until you got the news. But how often was she measuring the oxygen level in your blood?
Well, okay, here's the deal with that. She couldn't get near me, right? So I was in my room. She didn't want to come in. So basically, she threw the thing to me, and I was doing it myself because we were separated at that time. She didn't want to get this virus.
Well, and then it's important to reiterate that she is the primary caregiver for her aging mother who lives a couple of hours south of you guys, Ellen, right? And so
Yes,
she's
exactly.
down there for the last year or two a lot looking after her. And now she has this worry of getting COVID and not being able to see and help her mom in this whole process as well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So she was nursing me, doing an excellent job, by the way, through my door, basically.
Yeah.
Or she'd go outside to the slider and yell through the window.
So what happened on Sunday then? Because I know we got the family text Sunday evening that they had taken you to Swedish. So take us through what happened Sunday.
Yeah, so Sunday, it was probably about noonish again. I was checking my oxygen levels and they were down below 90, which is not good. And I was really struggling that day with breathing and zero energy. So Mary got on the phone with the nurse, the telehealth nurse lady, and she says, "You got to get that guy to the ER." So Mary packed me up, and we are going into Seattle to Swedish hospital, of course, and we got to take a ferry and then drive a half hour into town. Thank God there was nobody on the roads that day. So it takes about an hour to get there, and she just put me in the passenger seat with the mask on, and it was the longest hour of my life. I was just a blob over there. The sun was in my eyes. I couldn't stand the sun. I had a hat on over my head, and an hour trip seemed like it took 3 hours. It was a rough trip in there.
And I've heard that and read about it from others that you don't want to eat, you don't want to drink, you don't want to move, that this virus has a way of just kind of overtaking you.
Yes, it definitely envelops you for sure.
Did you push back on going to the hospital, or once that call came in, did you say, all right, load me up and let's go?
Yeah, at that time, I knew this wasn't going to get any better. And if I stayed home, it might be tragic. So at that point, yes, I gathered some stuff up and got in the car and away we went.
In hindsight, if you had not gone on Sunday to the hospital when you did, what do you think would have happened?
Oh,
I tell you.
on Monday morning, I probably would have had to call 911 and they had to taken me somewhere. If I made it through Sunday, I was feeling that bad. So,
Elsie, what did you got the call on Sunday? I would would imagine about the next steps of going to Swedish hospital.
Yeah. So my mom was calling me maybe every 30 minutes, and I was moving all of our stuff from the U-Haul into our storage unit that day with my husband's family, and she kept calling, and she was really concerned. And for me, I'm a medical student. I don't have a license yet. I can't give advice. I also can't see my dad. Like, I don't know what's going on. She has better eyes and ears than I do. So I said, Mom, you should call his primary care doctor. Like, I think that's the best steps. She called him and got in touch with the telehealth nurse, and she talked to me and she goes, Elsie, like, which hospital should we go to? Because there is a local community hospital that is closer to our house, but ultimately my mom and I decided that he should go to Swedish, and although it was a ferry ride, they had all of his records there from his past hospitalization that we talked about earlier. It was a lot of courage on her part to say, no, we're going, because I think my dad was really resistant at first, and it's a hard call to make because you don't want to be wrong, right? You don't want to show up and they'll be like, oh, well, you're fine, just go home. That's never a good feeling.
So you got there, Chris. Did it take a while to get in, or what was the reaction of the staff there when you showed up? And did you call in advance? Did they know you were coming in?
Yeah, we did call in advance, because you have to when you're a COVID patient. And we got there, and they were immediately on me. Mary went in and told them I was here, and they came out with a wheelchair, wheeled me into the ER, put me in this little bed in this little, like a little dungeon ER room. And the doc came in and took all my vitals and immediately put me on oxygen. Thank God. That made me feel a little bit better because I was getting some air finally. So they did that, and they did a bunch of blood tests, and then they took some more x-rays there. And I was probably in the ER for just over an hour. It was pretty quick. They took care of me.
Was it busy in the hospital?
No, I saw, and I don't know if it's because I was a COVID patient, but I didn't see a single other patient.
Interesting.
And they wheeled me kind of through a side door where I didn't go through the main entrance.
So they really kept you in isolation the whole time as best they could. And I would imagine they were all decked out in the hazmat gear and whatever they wear.
Yeah, down in the ER, they just had their scrubs on and, a robe, if you will, over that, and goggles and a mask in the ER.
Talking about that point you said where finally you've got some oxygen going, leading up to this, what were you experiencing breathing-wise and lung-wise, for the few days leading up to it, where when they finally put that tube in your nose, it was a bit of relief?
Well, yeah, it was like you're breathing out of maybe an eighth of your lungs. So you had these really, not gasping for air, but really, really short breaths. So breathing a lot in a minute is what I was doing, just little breaths. And you could tell you're not getting enough oxygen.
Did you ever get the sense or feeling almost like you were being suffocated by this?
Not really like a suffocation, just, gosh, it's hard to explain. It's just like you're just going to get enough air, and your head was hurting. Everything was hurting on top of that. So you're thinking about that pain. You're also thinking about you can't breathe, and it was just difficult to breathe. I can't really explain it to you, in a really good way.
And Elsie, I'm no doctor, nor do I play one on my podcast, but I would imagine that lack of oxygen is one of the big precursors to completely shutting down your body.
Absolutely. You need to oxygenate your blood to circulate to all your organs. Most importantly, the brain, the heart, the lungs themselves. So getting below a certain number is dangerous. Absolutely.
And that's the number that always came up, was below 90. And I don't know how low I got. I remember an 87 in there at one time. So.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember that I might completely be misremembering this, but it seems like in the text that we got that night that you were down around 80. Could that possibly have been right?
I don't know I don't know at that point, because I wasn't thinking straight, not listening to all the numbers. So I don't know how low I got. Maybe Elsie does. I don't know if the doctors told her or not.
No. Mom just said the lowest you got in her pulse ox was 86, as far as I know, but that's still pretty concerning. Like if I saw a patient like that in the hospital, it'd make me very concerned.
So that's anything under 90 is a bummer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. 92.
Anything under 92. Okay. So Chris, you were in ER for an hour or two, you said?
Yeah, maybe just over an hour.
And then they did what?
Then they wheeled me down into the ICU.
No, Dad, you were on the ortho floor first.
Oh, was I?
See, you remember that?
Remember. No, I don't, actually. Tell me about that, Elsie.
So I got the report from Mom, who had talked to the nurses, because for Mom, she just had to drop him off at the ER and hope she was going to see him again, which was very scary. But she told me, Dad's on the ortho floor. This is his nurse's number. And then I get a text, Dad's in the ICU. So for me, I was like, okay, he's on the ortho floor. They put him on some oxygen. He's stable enough to be there. And then when they say that they needed to transfer him to the ICU, that's when I started getting really concerned.
See, I don't remember going to that ortho floor. I don't remember that at all. I thought they went right into ICU. Interesting.
That's
So,
just the report I got. I can't
Elsie,
say
was
that.
this then late Sunday night you were getting this?
Yeah, late Sunday night. And I was really, really upset because if you think about it, when your family member is in the hospital in any other time frame, you're able to go, right? Like my mom would have been able to be there, communicate with the nurses, see how he's looking, like be there for comforting him as well. But with coronavirus, he's by himself. It's so scary and you can't be there with him, which is the worst part.
Chris, then what's the next thing you remember?
Oh, well, that's what I was saying. I remember going into that ICU, then the nurses coming in and taking all my vitals again and putting a IV in me and hooking me up. I don't know what those are called, Elsie, with all the stickers all over your body so they can monitor you.
The EKG.
Yep, they put all the EKG stuff on me and, of course, put the oxygen in me again. And I think at that point I was at 6 liters of oxygen, which is a pretty high number.
Mm-hmm.
And then they just left. They left the room because these nurses and docs, with how great and responsible and wonderful they are, did not want to be in my room very long. So they came in, did their job, and got out. And then I was just there, laying there, and they kind of faced me out, and it's a big sliding glass door there that they come in through. So the whole wall is glass. So I was looking out at all these nurses monitoring me the whole time. And if they had to communicate to me often, they'd knock on the window and yell at me, or sometimes they'd call on the phone.
And you were in ICU for 2 days, right? So that Monday and that Tuesday?
Yeah, and that Monday is the day when I really found out that it was real, because the doc came in at this time and he said, we need a verbal agreement from you so we could give you a DNR. And I didn't even know what the heck that meant, basically. But so yeah, they put a DNR sticker on my door, and that's when I knew it was real.
And Elsie, a DNR sticker says what?
Do not resuscitate. And so for me, not being there, I was really concerned. Why does he have a DNR sticker on his window? Apparently, what they're doing is pasting all of their information on windows so you can see them quickly. But I was talking to his doctor specifically. I said, hey, I'm a 4th-year medical student. So they know that I know most of what's going on, or I'm able to speak the language at least. And I was like, why does he have a DNR sticker? Like that's normally someone who's, like 85, 90 years old. And they've kind of decided that they wouldn't want to take any extraordinary measures. And the doc told me, look, if he gets to the respiratory status where he is just in cardiac arrest, the prognosis or just his outcome will be extremely poor. And he said, if you think about it, we would also have to put on full protective gear. If he were to have like a heart event because of this, we would have to take time to put on full protective gear. And that is time lost to save him, if that makes sense. So he wouldn't be oxygenating his brain, and there's more likely for brain damage. If patients get to that point where they are having cardiac arrest, it's a pretty poor prognosis if he were to be resuscitated. And so that's why in this hospitalization, as uncomfortable as it was for me, he was DNR. It made sense. He was also in the ICU, so there was that concern. I mean, again, I wasn't his doctor, but there was that concern that he might need further measures to help him oxygenate, like positive pressure, like forcing more air down, or being intubated, which is the tube down your trachea. And so if he was in the ICU, it was just very serious. Those measures could have been taken.
When you got that word about the DNR sticker, your heart must have just absolutely sunk to the floor.
Yeah. I thought it was a mistake. And, it's just crazy to think about, because like we've said this entire time, oh, it won't be my family. It's not going to be my parents. They're in their 50s. They're healthy. They're fine, and yeah, they're in the Seattle area, but my dad lives on 20 acres and he doesn't really see anyone. He should be fine. And then all of a sudden the world flips. My dad's in the ICU. I'm calling from San Diego now to the nurse's station, just trying to get an update, it's surreal to say the least.
Parking back to that protective gear. I've watched those guys get dolled up before they come in, and it takes at least 5 minutes to put all that stuff on just to come into my room. So after they explained that to me, and then I kind of understood.
Yeah, I guess it just kind of becomes a cut your losses mentality when they're dealing with a pandemic in this way, and they just can't take the normal procedures that they would for fear of, okay. And I guess it's quite a blessing too that you ended up at Swedish Hospital, because they have a remarkable record of helping people overcome COVID, it sounds like.
Huge, very huge. And that's what happened on the second day of that. I was in ICU, and I got a call on the phone from the hospital there, and it was a lady asking if I'd be willing to take this trial drug. And I knew nothing about this trial drug, but I got 2 big packets of papers here, and she talked to me for a half an hour on that phone explaining these papers. So they bring the papers in, I got to sign them and date them and do all that stuff, and then I got to take a picture of them and text them back to her saying that yes, I'm willing to take this trial drug. And that's the first day I got on the remdesivir.
So I'm straight on this. They couldn't come in and talk to you about this. She had to actually call you on your mobile phone, your cell phone?
No, there's a little hospital phone there on your bed.
Okay.
And she called me that. She was not a nurse or anything. She was just taking care of the paperwork for this study on this
An administrator.
Drug.
I got you.
Administrator, yes.
So then you agreed to this. They sent in the paperwork. You've got to muster the energy to sign it all. You probably have no energy to read it, but so you're just going on their word. You sign it, and then to take a picture of it. What did you use your iPhone to take pictures of it, or how did they do that?
I took my own cell phone here and took a picture of it, and then texted the pictures of the signed pages to her.
Wow. Okay. So tell us about the trial drug, or what you know about it. And Elsie, maybe you can jump in here too. Being a trial drug, there may be not a lot to know about it. What was it called again?
Remdesivir.
Remdesivir.
It's been on the news a lot lately. It's kind of the go-to drug now. And they administered it through my IV, and it takes about 30 minutes, for it all to flow into you. And they did that at 6:30, and I remember that because every other time I got it, it was at 6:30 at night.
Elsie, what do you know about remdesivir?
Well, it's not a drug that we learned as our basic drugs for our pharmacology courses. And so what I was learning about it was just, what I was reading in research articles and just what I could get, like little blurbs about what it is. And so that I knew that it was a drug that had been developed for SARS and MERS in the past. But with drug trials and everything like that, it takes time. So what I understood basically is just kind of from guessing. My dad has a client who is a doc and a cardiologist, and I'd been in contact with him a lot throughout this whole process of my dad being hospitalized. And this doc kept sending me different articles and different papers and things that I could kind of read because I've had the practice now with the medical vocabulary and just trying to understand it. And so I knew that there were 2 options that the FDA was like really looking at, but I one day took the time to look through all of the trials that were open, and there are hundreds of trials. This research is getting just a lot of funding and a lot of use. And I think what's really amazing is the crosstalk between the entire world of what we're finding and what we're learning about this disease. So I didn't know a lot, but I just knew the name of the drug and was able to do some little background research more for my learning, I guess, than anything.
Chris, did you have any immediate response to remdesivir, or did you think it was working, or what happened next?
Well, to be honest with you, I couldn't really tell. They put it in at 6:30, and I was probably asleep by 7:30. But I did wake up in the next morning feeling better, a little bit better. It's like, okay, I'm doing all right now. And that's the day they moved me up to the regular COVID wing of the hospital. So apparently all my signs, vital signs and everything were looking up. So they got me out of ICU the day after they gave me that remdesivir.
So now we're on April 1st, April Fool's Day, and they moved you up into, and I remember the picture that somebody sent from your, or I guess you must have taken yourself of that beautiful view looking out over Seattle.
Yeah.
And there was a bit of a metaphor to that. It's like, oh, okay, maybe he's turned the corner here, just with that picture alone. But what were you feeling like then starting April?
Well, at that point, they moved me up, and I was just really glad to get out of that ICU. But I was still basically chained to my bed with all the stuff going into me and whatnot. But it was just nice to get into an airy, nice room. And I was on the COVID floor, and I was one of 25 other patients on that floor.
25 patients on the COVID floor. Now, were you able to eat or drink, or were they just giving you everything intravenously?
No, I was eating. I mean, I was forcing myself to eat still at this point. I made myself take chicken broth or ice cream or something because I knew I needed something in my belly. So I did the best I could eat 3 times a day, which was not a lot.
When did they finally release you from the hospital?
They finally released me that Saturday, which would be the 4th. Because, well, let me go through the other few days with you. I got into that room and they were knocking down my oxygen. I think it was down to maybe 2 liters at that time. So they're tapering everything off and still giving me the remdesivir at 6:30 every night. And then one of the nurses came in and said, if you can go overnight without any oxygen at all, you could probably get out of here. Of course, I wanted to get out of there. So I was down to 1 liter at that time, and I said, all right, I'm going to sleep tonight without this oxygen on. Then about 1 o'clock in the morning, and comes running back in. Oh, Mr. Howell, we got to put that oxygen back on you, because all the alarms were going off, and I was beeping and thought, then I thought, I'm crushed. I don't know how long I'm going to be in this hospital at this time. And each of those days I was in that room, they were taking blood from me, 3 vials, 4 vials. And then the day before I got out, they came in and took 15 vials of blood out of me. And I think a lot of that was for that remdesivir testing and stuff, but that was a lot of blood. It was, Thursday night is when I tried to go without oxygen and I couldn't. And then the next day they came in, it would be Friday the 3rd, and the same nurse came in and he said, well, I'm going to weigh you now. So somehow they weigh in the bed and I was 160 pounds. I had lost 15 pounds in those 4 days or something. Wow. And now I hear these other guys talking on the news. That's the Corona diet. And the nurses told me everybody loses 15 to 20 pounds on this thing. So, and that was another shot in the gut. I thought, oh man, what is happening to me? That was kind of brutal.
Ice cream.
Yeah. That's when I started eating more ice cream.
Exactly.
Grandpa Howell would be very proud. And
that's what I was going to say. Yeah. Dad was reaching down saying, son, you got to eat more ice cream.
Exactly. And then on that Friday as well, the doc came in and he was like, you're doing really well. And Elsie knows more about this than I do, but there's a protein in your blood that spiked last night, which meaning it's still fighting the virus, I guess. Is that right, Elsie?
It's just, it's a protein it's not really specific, but it shows that your body's inflamed. And, I think the doc, when I was talking to him, wanted it to trend downwards, and it was going up and down and up and down. And so they wanted to make sure that it was going all the way down before they would let him go.
During this time, Elsie, you had quite a lot of contact with the hospital and the doctors and so forth. Did you find it was easy for you to communicate? And do you think it was easier because of your medical background and training, or do you feel like any loved one that was going through this would have that same sort of access?
So for me, I felt a little bit more confident talking to the nurses and doctors just because that's what I've been doing for the past 2 years in my clinical rotations. But just calling in, I felt bad. I know that these nurses and physicians are so busy and they're taking care of a lot of patients. They're working really long hours. And so even though I knew that it was okay to call, I still felt very bad. But I called one day and I was talking to the nurse and I kept thanking her for what she was doing. And she says, don't feel bad about calling. You can call as much as you need to. I am your eyes and ears because you can't be here. So call whenever you need. And so sometimes I would call and I would talk to the nurse and just like, hey, how are his stats and, his vitals today? How is he looking? And sometimes she would tell me like, oh, I bumped down the oxygen just a little bit while your dad wasn't looking, see how he does with that. And so that was nice. And then I also asked them, hey, could you just, tell the doc to call me when he can. And I always made sure to say that I'm a fourth year medical student so that they could just speak the same language. But I think, back to your question, Uncle Park, that because we can't be there, I think the nursing staff and the physicians are more than willing to talk to family members. If anyone had a family member there, they'd be happy to discuss everything that's going on, just like they would if you were actually in the hospital.
Yeah, they really, really are amazing, aren't they? These frontline practitioners and nurses and what they're doing for people around the world. I mean, it's quite incredible.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Elsie, when did you feel like the information you were getting from them was on the uptick? I mean, getting brighter, that you felt like maybe your dad had turned the corner?
I think the time I felt that was when he left the ICU. I knew that they weren't concerned about his status as much of needing further measures. And so I felt like he definitely was turning the corner when they were decreasing his oxygen requirement. And I know that, he wasn't feeling 100% better, but his body was starting to show signs that it was healing. So that's when I felt a little bit more comfortable, especially when I would call the nurse and she was like, yeah, he was on 1 liter of oxygen today. I'm like, that's great. That's a step in the right direction. And I know for my dad, he really wanted to just, muscle through it and get out there and try no oxygen overnight. And that didn't end up working sometimes, but it really felt good when he was out of the ICU.
And Chris, that oxygen they gave you, I've had this question several times to me too. Was it a mask, an oxygen mask, or was it just simply the tube that they have in both nostrils?
Yeah, just the tube that's in both nostrils.
And you said they gave you 6 liters. Now, for the rest of us, and that's a lot apparently. Elsie, can you put that into some sort of context for us? How much is 6 liters, or how much do we normally take in?
So I don't know exactly how much we normally take in. I think it's just like an amount that's flowing through the tubing going in front of your nose. And so 6 liters it's a lot. You would definitely notice 6 liters. It's not forcing into your nose, but it's just going at a higher speed and a lot more oxygen. So even being on 2 liters is significant, because anytime a patient comes in and they have a new oxygen requirement, we don't want to send them home on oxygen. We want to get them 100% better. So 6 liters is a lot.
So Chris, take us to the day they finally let you go. What was that like for you?
Oh, that was wonderful. I took my last dose of remdesivir the day before. So I had 4 doses of remdesivir, which is generally given out in 10 doses, but apparently it worked so well on me, they got me out, right? So
wow,
the doctor,
just 4.
Just 4, yeah. So the doctor came in the next morning and he checked everything and he said, and that night I did sleep without oxygen. And he said, yep, we're going to get you released today, and which would be Saturday. I was out of there by about noon. Best thing in the world was walking out those hospital doors. Beautiful day, mountains were out, just, oh, it was so nice.
And I bet Mary had a gigantic grin on her face when she picked you up.
Oh, she was ready to come and get me for sure.
Yeah.
So we headed back to the ferry. But I got a little story I got to tell you about while I was in the hospital up in the COVID floor. Everybody that would come into your room was very guarded. I mean, they wore 2 of everything, right? And they'd come in and they'd do their work, and you could tell it was uncomfortable. They didn't want to get it. I mean, they were very professional and awesome. But then when they'd leave, they would take the outer layer off and leave it in the room and then go out the door. Well, on was it Thursday, I guess, this little lady that I'd never seen before kind of backs into the room. And she's all geared up. You can't see her at all. And she doesn't even look at me. And she starts cleaning. It kind of breaks me up. Just a second. She starts cleaning the room and just not paying any attention to me at all. And then she starts, she cleans the room for maybe 15 minutes and she walks out the door and she says, my name's Julie, in a really broken Italian accent. She says, I'm praying for you. And she left. She was like an angel. Excuse me. And then she came back the day I was getting released. Same deal. Walks in, cleans. And I mean, with not a care in the world, not even where everybody else was guarded, she wasn't. And then she goes and she's cleaning up my sink and she says, yeah, I'm not going to be here this weekend. I got to go clean my garage. I said, oh, you got to go home and work for free, huh? She kind of laughs and she says, I'll pray for you all weekend and you won't be here when I get back. And she just left. It was like an angel from God. It really gave me relief.
Was she almost more like a custodian versus a nurse?
She was a janitor
in there doing her job
without a care in the world. Like I said, everybody else was really kind of not nervous, but on edge in there. But she was just the happiest little Italian janitor you can imagine. It was amazing, and that really, literally gave me relief. Just when she said she was praying for me.
Wow, that's pretty incredible.
Yeah, she was awesome.
So you got home, you got back to your beautiful place out there, 20 acres. You are now really isolated. And I guess you had to go into isolation in your own home for a couple of days. Was that the next?
Yeah, no, for a week. So it has to be 7 days since you get released. So yeah, I was basically in my bedroom for 7 days.
And then your wife, Mary, gets COVID.
Yeah, she got tested. I don't know what dates those were, but she did. She had a pretty high fever, higher than I ever got for a week or so. So she went and got tested positive for COVID. But her symptoms were way less than mine. She just had the fever basically is all. And she kind of blew through it for about a week is how long that lasted. And she just got tested again 2 days ago and found out today that she's negative for COVID now.
So she can go back down and treat, hang with her mom, Ellen, and take care of her.
Yeah,
now.
She went down this morning, actually.
Elsie, this is a question that I've had and others have asked me too for Mary. So Mary has this symptom of this temperature. She's not carrying the other symptoms with her, but she has that, and she's been around your dad. So they test her, she's positive, but they said she's got COVID, but she's asymptomatic. Why do they say that when she has a symptom like a temperature?
That's interesting. I'm not 100% sure. I mean, she does have a symptom, like you said, she had a high fever, but a high fever can be from a lot of different things. So she's really not exhibiting the symptoms that we would expect to see, like the shortness of breath, the cough. So I guess that's why she's asymptomatic, because she could attribute that to a lot of different things, that fever to a lot of different things. And, if she didn't even have that fever, like a lot of other people who have COVID and don't know it, she could easily just be walking around and being in the community and not know, and unconsciously spread it to other people, who are at high risk or who just get really bad symptoms for no reason, like my dad did.
So Chris, you're back home now and you're taking care of yourself. Mary's there helping you along. You said she just has been an absolute godsend as well. And now then she's dealing with it, but now has gotten through it apparently. You feel like you were coming out of the woods, and then what happened?
Well, I was feeling pretty good, and then I had a follow-up with my GP, and I went down there, and everything was good, and I mentioned to him that I got kind of a sore leg here, and he looked at it, didn't say a whole lot about it, and on my way home, Elsie called me, and we just were talking about conversations, and I mentioned to her that my shin and foot, hurt a little bit, and I guess that kind of got her ears up, and she's like, Dad, you need to go to the ER. You might be having a blood clot. So go ahead, Elsie. You can go from there.
Yeah, he just mentioned it in passing, and I'm so glad that he did, because I know personally, that he's had a clot in the past. When he was home from his surgery, he had a clot that was in his legs and then went to his lungs. All of a sudden, he was telling me, yeah, I'm like walking around outside, and I was just short of breath. So I called my doctor, and they said, you need to go right in. So I knew that it had happened to him before. And I think there were a lot of different things that made me really concerned. And, it was one-sided, and, it was red and painful, and it had happened to him in the past. And so, again, I didn't want to push him, but I knew that I needed to get someone to check it out. Like I keep saying, I'm not his doctor, but I really wanted him to go get it looked at.
So this was what, around April 7th, 8th, 9th? in that?
I think that was April 10th.
April 10th, Friday
Yeah,
the
it was. It was
10th.
Friday the 10th.
So you'd been home for a week and then started developing these blood clots problems. So
Yeah, it probably started Wednesday, and then I told Elsie on Friday about it.
Yeah, and he said, Elsie, I don't know, maybe if I just wear flip-flops, it'll go away. I was like, Dad, I don't know. I really don't think if it is this serious, it could cause a lot of damage that you don't know, and it could damage your heart, and it could damage your lungs, and they've already probably had some damage from coronavirus. And so I really encouraged him to go talk to his own doctor about it.
So what'd you do, Chris?
Yeah, so I gave them a call, and they said, well, we can't test you here or anything, so you need to go to the ER in Silverdale at Harrison Hospital there. So I drove in there, and it was back to the same old routine. You got to go through all these tents and checks, and you got to tell them you're a COVID guy and the whole thing. And they got me into the ER, and they did an ultrasound on me, and what else did they do?
They took
CT.
CT.
Oh yeah, they took a CT scan and gave a blood test as well. So with the ultrasound, they did find out, yes, indeed, you have a blood clot in your leg, superficial blood clot in your leg. And with the CT scan, that's how they found out that, yes, I have a blood clot in my lung as well. And those images were quite interesting. The first one he showed me, you could really see the COVID damage in there. Obviously, why I'm having a tough time still breathing. There's a lot of COVID damage in the bottom part of my lungs.
What does that look like?
Well, as Paul Herrick said, it looks like those pictures of the bombings you saw in World War I, the big Scrafen bombings.
Mm-hmm.
It's like little explosions all over the bottom of your lungs. I could send you some of those pictures.
Yeah, if you would, that'd be good.
Yeah, and then the blood clot is a bigger, wider pattern up in the middle of my lung.
Elsie, was this what obviously directly related to COVID and what he went through? Had you heard about blood clots being a problem before with other COVID patients, or do you think Chris was predisposed to it, seeing how it had showed up following surgery several years before this?
So there's twofold answer. It could have been because he was laying around the hospital and not walking as much, but the physician who is my dad's client sent me a paper later about COVID patients being more predisposed to having blood clots. And it's all preliminary research, but there is correlation, we should say. We don't know that it causes blood clots, but there is a correlation with blood clots, at least from the paper that Kent showed me, which was pretty interesting.
Well, in laying around the hospital, in my mind, I thought about Chris, and I'm thinking, here's a guy out of all of us who's in by far the best shape in the work he does, and a skier and so forth, no pre-existing conditions, and yet being sedentary for that, full week in the hospital, but even leading up to that and having the COVID, wreaking havoc on his body, it can put a person into decline and devastate them rather quickly, it sounds like.
Oh, yeah, very quickly. And in the hospital, they were giving me shots for blood clots, right? So, But by the time I got out of there, I didn't have shots for a week, and that's probably where it caught me.
Yeah.
And then you ended up back in the ER. Did you spend the night in the ER out there in Silverdale?
Nope. I was in there for 6 hours, and they did these blood tests and checked the blood going to my heart and whatnot, I guess. And they decided those were all negative, so they turned me loose and sent me home with blood thinners. I'm on blood thinners now.
Okay. And to be, for me to, again, time-wise, was that Friday the 10th or Saturday the 11th you were in there?
Friday the 10th. I got home here about 8:30 at night.
So we are recording this show on Saturday, April 18th. Again, just to have a timestamp on it so everybody knows. You've now been back home for a week. What has it been like for you?
Well, it was, like I said, at the beginning of the week, it was going really well until I got these blood clots. And now I'm probably running on a quarter of my energy if I do anything. I redid the sheets on my bed and cleaned everything up and made the bed. And after that, I was shot. I was done for the day, basically. So I'm still, low on energy, and it's still pretty difficult to breathe. Not pretty. I mean, in the mornings, it's difficult. Once I get moving, it gets a little better, but I got to take some deep breaths periodically. But all this time, I've been COVID home monitoring. I've been being monitored through cell phones and this telehealth. They check me 3 times a day, check my blood pressure and my oxygen levels and my temperature and how much I'm breathing and all those things. So I monitor with them 3 times a day. And I got to tell you, if you screw up a number, man, they call you right now. You think nobody's listening, but they are. They're really, really monitoring me. So.
And that's a special app that you have on your phone?
Yeah, it gives me an alert at 8 in the morning, 2 in the afternoon, and 7 at night. So I got to check it in with them and do a survey.
Okay, so you call them then, and you did one, I think, prior to the show?
Yeah, I just text them, and I did that, right before we started doing this. They texted me the survey, and I texted back to them. But they'll call you if your numbers are bad. I mean, they're immediate. They're right on you.
And what do they ask you in the survey?
Well, I can go through it if I could find it here. Mostly, are you feeling better today? How's your breathing? Then they ask me my heart rate, temperature, and oxygen level.
So they do some subjective screening, just how are you feeling, just to kind of see where your head is around this. And then they go into qualifying it with your some vital signs, basically, that you just provide them.
Yeah, exactly. And they do that for 2 or more weeks. And this is actually the 2nd week. So this may be my last day of that monitoring.
Do you feel like you're getting better?
No, it was kind of a setback with those blood clots, I think. So right now, I guess very slowly. They say it could take 6 to 8 weeks, till you feel good again. And I've had another friend that had this that didn't have to be hospitalized, and he's been, Al, Al.
Mm-hmm.
He was ahead of me by maybe 3 weeks, and I talked to him yesterday, and he says he still doesn't have his full energy. He's about 90% maybe. So
he's still dragging.
Yeah, it's going to take some time, and then I got to heal the rest of my body. And Dan, my brother Dan, had made a very good point. He says you got to mellow out and let the inside of your body heal. Which I'm used to healing my outside of the body, but I don't think about the inside of the body. And I think that's the rest and stuff is what heals that inside. And I got to do a better job at that.
And just relax, put your feet up, and enjoy the downtime. I guess I know, as aggravating as that is.
Yeah, and when you feel tired, take a break, rest, sleep, do whatever you have to do. So I'm talking myself into doing that now.
Elsie, so what an interesting time for you and for Spencer, having, just graduated, driving across the country for your residency out in San Diego, and then going through all this, which essentially is, I guess, an upper level class on COVID. That what have you learned over the last couple weeks that has surprised you as a young medical practitioner about this disease?
What has surprised me? I think it's just surprising how invested everyone is in this. I'm really proud of what we've done as a country to stay at home. At the beginning of all this, I didn't think we were going to get to that level. I was, listening to NPR's stories and their own podcast about residents in Italy and how they were staying at home, and someone would go to the grocery store and drop off groceries for them. And that's all the interaction that they would get. And I never thought that we would get there with the United States. And, I'm really thankful that we have, and we've taken this under control, at least a little bit. I think I've learned a lot about the disease itself, and that we're still learning a lot about it. But it's also reminded me that medical education is something that is lifelong. Something that they've said throughout medical school is that you're going to be continuing to learn throughout your career. And it's provided a little bit of that spark to keep learning, to keep investigating on my own. Just because I don't have exact courses to teach me things doesn't mean I'm not responsible to learn. And I think it's also been an education in how to communicate effectively with my parents in regards to their health, and kind of be an advocate for them, but also remember that I'm not their physician and that there are other great people out there to take care of them.
Yeah, and Chris, leading up to this interview, I sent notes out to a lot of our friends and family, and, did you have any questions for Chris? So I just want to go through a couple of them. This is what is on the top of people's minds. So our good buddy, Mike Martin Smoke, asks, has anything good come from this experience for you?
Oh man, that is a fantastic question. has anything good come from it? Well, right now, I probably would say no. It's been brutal. Maybe hindsight down the road, I'll look back and find something good, I guess. Yeah, right now, I would say no, nothing good.
Then his next question was on the heels of that is, or what did you learn from being in the system and seeing this happen firsthand?
Oh, I learned that those people, those healthcare workers, are working their butts off and trying to be positive constantly, and terribly dangerous situation, honestly. And how much they've learned. I mean, since I've been out of the hospital, the knowledge they've come to get about this COVID is night and day. I mean, when I left, nobody had any answers about anything. Didn't know what drug would work. They knew nothing about it, but they seem to have progressed pretty quickly in figuring this disease out, this virus out. I was very impressed with that.
I remember when I was talking to you, I think you were still in the hospital. We had a brief conversation and I asked you about, the treatment you were getting, and you had made the point of they're just making this protocol up as they go. They're learning. I'm literally a test patient, and they're learning on me of what works and maybe what doesn't work. So it sounds like, in your opinion, they've made quite a lot of advances just in the past couple of weeks.
I really think they have. I mean, they're going to get a handle on this thing and get it figured out. It's remarkable, the research they're doing and what they're finding out through, not just me, patients all over the world. They're willing to help them. So
another question came in about plasma. Did they take a lot of your plasma, and are they studying that, or will they be using it? And maybe you don't have an answer to this unless someone told you, will they be potentially using that to build antibodies for other people?
Nope, they haven't taken any of my plasma, but I did check in with Bloodworks Northwest and the University of Washington that's doing that research. And they say they got a backlog of people willing to help, so they'll get a hold of me. But you also have to be 28 days clean before they'll even look at you. So I've reached out to them, and very willing to help them that as well. But that the plasma thing's completely separate than the hospital stay.
I got you. So when you say 28 days clean, that's when they would take your plasma?
Yeah.
I got you.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that'd be in the middle of next month if they need me. They'll probably give me a call.
Gotcha. Then I had one last and maybe the most important question that came in from all of my folks. Bill Rozier asks, will the Cougars ever win the Apple Cup again?
Yes, with this new coach they have, get through this COVID stuff so they could actually have a full year of practice. Yes, they'll be back.
Well,
what a good question.
What a great question to end this particular episode. Anything else on your minds that I didn't cover, or any advice that you, now having gone through this from the inside out, literally, that you would offer listeners in keeping an eye on their own personal hygiene and health and the health of their loved ones?
Yeah, no, I just got to say, it's really a secret killer. I mean, I talked with the Kitsap County Health Department. I was on the phone with them for probably 2 hours trying to figure out where I might have got this, really with no conclusion of actually where I got it. It's such a scary thing because you never know. Just like, Mary could be walking around spreading it to people and she would have no idea. You still, to this day, you got to protect, wash your hands, and wear a mask whenever you're out, in public. Stay away from people. It's just imperative. You just have to do that. You got to follow the rules.
Yeah. So what you thought was the onset of allergies is actually something that almost took your life.
Yeah, it could have got me for sure.
And Elsie, from your vantage point, if you've got a loved one that has this, any recommendations for our listeners?
I guess what I would suggest is calling your primary care doctor. They are really your advocate and are able to kind of walk you through what you need to do to take steps to protect yourself and to protect your family. I think the CDC also has really good advice and recommendations, and a lot of information that people can read and learn about, protect themselves.
Thank you both for being here. And I know, Chris, when you finally got home, I said, boy, you need to really journal and write down everything you're going through. And we had talked the other day and you said you just didn't have the energy to do it. And I didn't know if you would be up for this interview or not until you said on that call, you said, I've become kind of the poster boy for COVID and I want everyone to know what I've been through. Yes. So thank you for sharing your story here with our listeners.
You're welcome. And I also want to thank all of the people that prayed for me, texted me, people coming out of the woodwork, people I haven't talked to in 30 years were texting me. I got a text from Guatemala. Just the support I've had through this whole thing. I just want to thank everybody out there for it. I mean, and it really, really helped.
We're all in this together, folks. So if you know of someone who would benefit by hearing Chris and Elsie's story, then by all means, please share this episode with them. And if by chance you have lost a loved one to COVID-19, our hearts go out to you. Because we were the lucky ones. Chris made it through. But we can take luck out of the equation by simply using our heads, social distancing, proper hygiene, and together we can bring this beast to its knees. So remain happy and healthy out there, and thank you for listening to this edition of The Business of Story.